When Control was released originally in 2019, the game was considered a slightly underrated experience. Although it received praise from critics and attention from players, the overall premise of the game was vastly more than what casual players were expecting, and even serious players remarked at all that was depicted within the game. But the speculative scenario is this: Firebreak wasn't the proper sequel to Control. From information now known, Remedy Entertainment on 505 Games put a good amount of time, effort, and most importantly emphasis into Control. The story and in-game lore were surprisingly complex, and such aspects were easily misunderstood or not even fully comprehended by casual players. Though there were expansions for the game, there were varying opinions as to if the said game could or should be continued in reference to a prequel or sequel with the overall success for Control. At the time, sentiment from Remedy Entertainment was neutral about a sequel due to the sheer complexity as mentioned that was put into Control from a screenwriting or lore-based point of view. Remedy Entertainment was still neutral about furthering Control for a period of time, with nothing necessarily derived or decided upon with the Control brand. The neutrality with Remedy Entertainment being hesitant about pursuing anything further with Control eventually had a spin-off with the game being Firebreak, having it to be set within the Control universe, but none of this was public knowledge from the company due to fears that such a spin-off to Control wasn't what the gaming community preferred, instead of an outright sequel to Control. Especially with the details about how Control ended, it was all but guaranteed that there would be a sequel to the game, and with the original game getting further exposure in the years since the 2019 release, had even more attention or desire for a Control sequel. Despite the true sequel to Control being developed, Remedy Entertainment later decided to implement time and effort to make the Firebreak spin-off. The opinion was that Firebreak would satisfy Control fans temporarily during the continued wait for the sequel, and at the same time potentially bring in casual players for the first-person shooting experience of Firebreak. When the game was released, there were various problems associated to the game, and the player community was under the impression that Firebreak would have been a more serious experience, much like the original Control game was. Firebreak ended up being an outright disaster for Remedy Entertainment, and the situation was so obscene that the company's full focus was later put onto the sequel with Control outright. In an aspect of irony, Firebreak ended up costing the company more than the original Control in terms of financial losses or financial revenue, but criticisms finally halted that according to analysts and players, that should have happened to begin with instead of diverting resources into a spin-off game that no player wanted.